All right, so today we're going to be looking at a couple different sources, looking at some comments, and you see the title here. I'm going to be talking about that Harper's letter sent out by all these leftists who are really fighting back. So we're looking at Red State here. Obviously, you know its political leanings. Shout out to Strong and Grand, Tom Jones, Irascible Me, all of you. Thank you for leaving all the comments you've left. I don't want to call you gentlemen because I don't know if you all are, but I've got a 50% chance of getting that right, assuming that you are male. A little something for you. You know, 50% chance. That Harper's letter signed by all those famous lefties decrying cancel culture is a joke. Skip past that part here. I'll archive all of this stuff in the description. You can check that out. This was a tweet that set it off a little while ago. People who menstruate. This is JK, obviously. I'm sure that there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. I gotta love it. Woo! Go a little bit more. Let's kind of skim through this letter real quick. I read this a couple times already. I had planned on doing this video for today, and Irascible Me kind of brought it to my attention again. So I had to go back and read it again, but let's go ahead and skim this bad boy real quick. Our cultural institutions are facing a moment of trial. Powerful protests for and social justices are leading to overdue demands for police reform, along with whiter calls for greater equality and inclusion across our society. Not least in higher education, journalism, philanthropy, and the arts. Sorry, I started to doze off there. But this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. As we applaud the first development, we also raise our voices against the second. The forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world and have a powerful ally in Donald Trump, who represents a real threat to democracy. Whoa, watch out now. But resistance must not be allowed to harden into its own brand of dogma or coercion, which right-wing demagogues are already exploiting. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that has set in on all sides. The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. While we have come to expect this on the radical right, censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues into a blinding moral certainty. We uphold the value of robust and even caustic counter-speech from all quarters. But it is now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. More troubling still, institutional leaders, in a spirit of panic damage control, are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishment instead of considering reforms. Editors are fired for running controversial pieces. Books are withdrawn for alleged inauthenticity. Journalists are barred from writing on certain topics. Professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class. A researcher is fired for circulating a peer-reviewed academic study. And the heads of organizations are ousted for what are sometimes just clumsy mistakes. Whatever the arguments around each particular incident, the result has been to steadily narrow the boundaries of what can be said without the threat of reprisal. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion among writers, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient zeal in agreement. This stifling atmosphere will ultimately harm the most vital causes of our time. The restriction of debate, whether by a repressive government or an intolerant society, invariably hurts those who lack power and makes everyone less capable of democratic participation. The way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion, not by trying to silence or wish them away. We refuse any false choice between justice and freedom, which cannot exist without each other. As writers, we need a culture that leaves us room for experimentation, risk-taking, and even mistakes. We need to preserve the possibility of good faith disagreement without dire professional consequences. If we won't defend the very thing on which our work depends, we shouldn't expect the public or the state to defend it for us. Here are the signatories. Pause it if you want to go ahead and read through these if you haven't done so already. Noam Chomsky. Very few people I recognize on here. Obviously, J.K. was there. Coleman Hughes, I've seen some of his videos before. Fareed Zakaria. All right, so let me show you this other source. All right, this is a little bit of a piece from The Guardian. And I know The Guardian's not all the way left, but I'm trying to show you a different perspective with this. So we skip down here, and they get a quote here from a senator, Brian Schatz. I looked him up. He's actually a Democrat from Hawaii. His take on the letter is that lots of brain power and passion is being devoted to a problem that takes a really long time to describe and is impossible to solve. And meanwhile, we have mass preventable death. Now, I don't know exactly what he's talking about. Maybe he's talking about COVID. Maybe he's talking about the 7,000 black-on-black murders each year. I don't know that any of those are preventable based on the current climate we live in. They're solutions to problems. But like I've talked about in my comments, and I was even commenting in reply to Strong earlier today, it's doing the hard thing, forcing accountability upon individuals. That's the hard thing, and that's why so many people take the route of least resistance. COVID's another story. Obviously, I'm referring to crime in black neighborhoods and black-on-black violence. But check this out. It's not without controversy, of course, even within the individuals who signed the letter. One of the original signatories to the letter, historian Carrie Greenidge, said she did not endorse it and was asking for a retraction. Her sister, the author Caitlin Greenidge, said she had been sent the letter and asked to sign it, but she declined. She told Harper's in a reply she shared online that she did not subscribe to the concerns in this letter and do not believe this threat is real, or at least I do not believe being asked to consider the history of anti-blackness and white terrorism when writing a piece after centuries of suppression of any other view in academia is the equivalent of a loss of institutional authority. Another signatory, writer Jennifer Finney Boylan, said she had not known who else had signed the letter. I thought I was endorsing a well-meaning if vague message against internet shaming. I did know Chomsky, Steinem, and Atwood were in, and I thought good company, the consequences are mine to bear. I'm so sorry. I did some further looking into this Boylan person. I guess they consider themselves a trans woman. Not exactly sure what that means. Is it a woman? Is it a man who thinks it's a woman? Not exactly sure. It's got a female name, so I'm assuming it's a woman of some sort. But let's take a look at some quick comments. And this is actually from an LGBT site that I found. So here's the site here. From the site name itself, you would expect the comments to go a certain way. So let's take a look at some of these comments. Don't worry, the trans writer has begged for forgiveness for supporting obviously transphobic concepts like freedom of speech and thought. And that's that Jennifer person they're referring to. Let me scroll up real quick and show you that. Here you go. Here's that person there. Female, I guess. I don't know about the UK, but in the US, freedom of speech is solely relegated to ceasing government-sponsored censorship. And the intent was to protect a free press. Laura here says in the UK, a woman was arrested and held in police custody for 7 hours for saying something disobliging to a tranny online. That was true. I'll have to pull that story and show you that real quick. That was a while back. Perhaps you forgot about that. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Say and write whatever you like. The public has the right to answer you, even if it's to advocate for people to not support you, which is true, but that's not really the point. The point is the censorious nature, and they even use that word in the letter that they penned, right? My opinion, it should all be open. Freedom of speech in totality, not this, oh, it's hate speech and this and that. It all needs to be out there. As I've always said in my other videos, I want to see it. I want to know what an individual is all about. And how do we get that? Freedom of speech. If people feel like they have the freedom to say and act in a manner with no repercussions, somewhat, then that will show us who that individual really is, who they are behind closed doors, right? Rather than trying to constrain them and have them act within these kind of speech boundaries. Let's read a little more here. Tell me if I'm misreading this, but advocating for freedom of speech would be creating a petition of protest against laws being used to restrict freedom of speech. That isn't what's happening. What's happening is that these people are protesting against social repercussions created by the readers of having a controversial opinion. So really, by creating this opinion, they're attempting to squash the free speech of their readers. Laura says no, they really aren't. There can be no freedom of speech if, any time you deviate from an approved script, you face a barrage of abuse and harassment. Susan says here they want the thrill of being rebels, with none of the downsides. Will says, but the readers aren't the ones attacking Rowling for telling the truth. And that makes a difference how, regardless, they feel as if people criticizing them is violating their rights, which is just nonsense. Will says, yes, you have demands for violence by cancel culture. Somebody else here says, so they operate as a monolith then. Also, it's the internet. If you've ever had even moderate fame, you get threats of violence, not isolated to this. If we interpret things as loosely as that, every political movement is trying to use violence because every movement has crazy people in it who use threats. I wanted to jump back to the Red State site and show you some of the tweets there at the bottom of the article. Dave Rubin, maybe you guys have heard of him. I hear he's pretty famous. Silly self-important letter by liberals who will sit and watch the world burn rather than turn to their conservative counterparts for help on how to fix it. They think rationale and logic can fix this mess? Nope, won't work. Plus, several signers here have tried to cancel me. George Zornick, wow, hopefully this will work and these prolific writers with access to massive platforms with international reach will no longer be stifled. Little cynicism there. Judd, this letter perfectly illustrates my issue with the cancel culture trope. The signatories of this letter have bigger platforms and more resources than most other humans. They are not being silenced in any way. Caitlin Burns, okay, last thought about the Harper's letter. The sheer number of signatories who have waded into the debate on the anti-trans side is astounding. I read many of the references to specific gripes in the letter's text as specifically directed at trans critics. And then it says here, some are so terrified of the reaction to the letter that they are already running like scalded dogs. And this was Carrie Greenidge that we mentioned previously. I do not endorse this letter. I'm in contact about retraction. And that female individual, her tweet, which we covered. Christopher Scalia, I'm sorry. I did not realize when signing a letter that warns of an expanding culture of ideological conformity, I was agreeing with people whose ideology does not conform to my own. So there you have it, everybody. People on the right have talked about this for the longest now, cancel culture. They're the ones that have been most affected by this. They're the ones that have seen their pages, their tweets, their thoughts being censored at a far greater rate than individuals on the left. And I've heard them. They've warned of it. Those of you watching this video, if you're somebody who's more moderate, somebody who's on the right, somebody who's not on the far left, you know how this is. You know how this has gone. You know individuals on the right have bared the brunt of this far more than individuals in the center or the left have. And they've warned you. They've told you so many times in so many ways over and over again. And it seems like they've been telling you this for a long time now, that once they're done with the right, then whoever's in the center or more moderate individuals, that'll be the new right. So the more they're able to censor individuals on the right, as those individuals fall off, who's left? It moves closer and closer to you if you're not somebody who's totally lockstep with that far left ideology. So it's interesting that these individuals on the left are looking to kind of appease the far left in a way. Oh, wait, we're going to say some things here that you don't like, but before we do, let's go on our anti-Trump and anti-police and like the systemic white racism rant. Let's make that the first paragraph so that that the far left knows that we're totally cool, that we're totally not bootlicking and everything, that we hate Trump first. But in addition to hating Trump, make sure you guys know that we hate him so much, but can you please, like, stop being mean to us a little bit? Go after them. They're the real problem. Interesting how they do that, right? And I think that's what a lot of people on the right and a lot of logical individuals get. When you try to point the finger at other people, yeah, sure, maybe that accelerates cancellation on the right, but it's like I said, the more and more people that get canceled off the right, the closer and closer the problem's going to get to you, JK, and all these other individuals that signed this letter. And you see what happened here. They went out like punks. Some of them that had signed the letter, oh no. They got 4 tweets that told them, oh, this isn't right. This you're on the wrong side of history on this one. And then, oh, I'm going to write Harper's. I'm going to I want a retraction. I meant it, but I got some pushback, and because I'm a pussy, now I'm going to ask for that retraction. I think a lot of you out there realize this, that as time passes, and it's what they say, cannibalizing their own, right? The far left doesn't want equality. It doesn't stand for equality. This woke culture doesn't stand for equality. They want the power. They want the control. And they're going to tear the far right, the center, and the left down in order to get that power. And in my opinion, perhaps some of you agree with this, but it's going to take a concerted effort from everybody who isn't far left to crush these losers on the far left and slow that momentum that they have, because they keep advancing a little bit more and more all the time. They keep getting more and more people kicked off the internet. They keep getting more and more people deplatformed. And they're able to keep creating situations where more and more individuals are losing money, while at the same time gaining more money for themselves, gaining corporate sponsorships, getting their little black check boxes on Twitter, getting companies to put these things up on their behalf, letter writing campaigns, contacting these companies, demanding monetary support for whatever cause they have. Their ability to take money from individuals across the spectrum and place it within their own coffers, which creates more and more power for them. That's the ultimate goal. That's how I see it. And as I said, it's going to take a concerted effort from all individuals who aren't far leftists to crush these losers, to crush these terrorists, to crush these communists, to crush these Antifa types, to crush these BLM types, to crush these black nationalist type individuals. It's going to take everybody who's down to fight. Doesn't seem like that many people are, right? All right, everybody. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think. Take care, everybody. Be well.